My name is Mark James from Arizona State University, and the title of my presentation is Does Variation in Learning Tasks Help to Promote Transfer of L2 Speaking Fluency? And I'll start by providing a bit of context. I'll describe a study today that's part of a series of studies that I've been doing on transfer of second language learning, which is the application of second language learning in new situations. It's an important topic because educators may take for granted that if students learn something, they will apply it in new situations, for example, outside the classroom. But a large body of research suggests that learning doesn't inevitably transfer, and it can be difficult to promote. So research like what I'll talk about today should shed a bit of light on things that we can do to help promote transfer of second language learning. This study focused on transfer of one particular kind of second language learning, speaking fluency. This was of interest to me because some of my own teaching experiences have been in EFL contexts where students sometimes complained that they had difficulty speaking fluently. And while plenty of research has examined how teaching can help second language learners to improve their speaking fluency, only a few studies have looked directly at whether that fluency transfers. For example, in one study, it's on the back of the handout, De Jong and Perfetti showed that if teaching involves getting students to repeat tasks, for example, by speaking about a topic for 4 minutes, then again for 3 minutes, then again for 2 minutes, this can help students to improve their speaking fluency, and this can transfer when they speak about new topics. But it's not clear if this learning would transfer not just with new topics, but to new kinds of tasks. And it's also not clear if getting students to repeat tasks is the only or the most effective technique for promoting transfer. For example, in discussions of how to teach for transfer, task variety is recommended because that can help students to see underlying patterns in whatever it is that they're learning. So with those gaps in mind, I designed an experimental study to see if second language teaching that involved task variety could promote transfer of speaking fluency. So in spring last year, I invited about 150 students in an undergraduate EAP course for engineering majors at a U.S. university to participate, and about 80 volunteered, but of those, about 30 completed the research. The 30 students were divided into an experimental group and 2 control groups. And the general design was that all 3 groups completed a pre-test, and 3 weeks later, an identical post-test. Each test took about 30 minutes, and the students did it individually, online, in their own free time. Each test involved doing 4 short speaking tasks, which were meant to differ in terms of how open-ended they were. The first task, which was the most open-ended, asked students, "Why do you like engineering?" And they had to record themselves speaking for 1 minute to answer. The second task, which was a little bit more closed, gave students a picture of a solar panel on campus and asked them for their opinion of what the problem was that structure was supposed to solve and how good of a solution it was from an engineering perspective. The third task, which was again a little bit more closed, gave students a floor plan of a house and asked them to describe the floor plan as if they were talking to a client who they were going to build the house for. And finally, the fourth task, which was the most closed-ended, gave students a series of abstract symbols that they were to describe. In the 3 weeks between the pre-test and the post-test, the experimental group did fluency training, which consisted of six tasks, 2 per week. These tasks were done individually, online, so in the student's free time, and each task took 10 to 15 minutes. For each task, the student was provided with a prompt, and the student had to record her or himself speaking in response to that prompt. To make sure that there was task variety in this fluency training, 3 of those tasks were relatively open-ended, like answering questions like, "What do you think about sports?" And the other 3 tasks were relatively closed-ended, involving describing a series of abstract symbols, like one of those tasks on the test that I gave. Between the pre-test and post-test, control group 1 also did fluency training, involving 6 speaking tasks, but there was no variation in those tasks, in that all 6 of them were open-ended questions, like, "What do you think about sports? What do you think about shopping?" And the third group, control group number 2, they just did the pre-test and post-test. They didn't do any kind of fluency training. To analyze the data, I transcribed all of the recordings from the pre-test and the post-test. I measured fluency as the number of syllables per minute for each task, and I ran statistical tests to see if there was any difference in task performance from pre-test to post-test for any of those 3 groups. In the table on the handout, we can see the results, and I'll highlight just a couple of things that sort of jumped out at me. First, we can see that the experimental group improved only on test task 4. Now, that's the test task that involved describing abstract symbols. So that task was similar to some of their fluency training. From that part of the results, I concluded that task variety in training had not promoted transfer to new task types. And that was the main thing I was interested in. But second, we can see that control group 1, and this was kind of interesting, control group 1 improved on all of the post-test tasks. In other words, they improved not only on the test task that was similar to their fluency training, but they also improved on the test tasks that were not similar to their fluency training. So from that part of the results, I concluded that control group 1's training had promoted transfer to new test tasks, to new task types. So that was a bit of a surprise. I had thought going into this that if any group was going to transfer learning to new tasks, it would be the experimental group, because their fluency training had involved task variety. But that ended up not being the case. Although the fluency training for the experimental group did have a positive impact, control group 1 is where we saw broader improvement, which suggests transfer to new tasks. And I'll wrap up here by saying that despite being unexpected, these results, I think, are positive because they suggest that second language teaching can help to promote transfer of speaking fluency. And this helps give second language educators something useful to work with. And with some follow-up research, we might confirm that the way that task variety was done in this study does not work as well as training with the same kind of task. Or we might find that task variety done in different ways, for example, in a longer training program than what I did here, might work even better. Either way, I think these results give a useful foundation for learning more about how to teach for transfer of second language speaking fluency. That's it for the formal bit. Any questions? Yeah.
Can you just tell me, what did the control group 1 do again?
They did fluency training. They did the same number of activities in fluency training. The only difference was that for the experimental group, I gave them 2 different types of training activities. So 3 of their training activities were open-ended, just answering questions. 3 of their training activities were closed in the sense that they had this series of symbols they had to describe. For control group 1, they had 6 activities that were all open-ended questions. The same as the first 3 activities that the experimental group did.
So an example would be, tell me about like your summers, that kind of thing.
That type of thing.
And I would talk to you for whatever, a minute.
That's it. Record yourself speaking, and in fact, I made those training activities. I didn't put that on the handout, but I made them similar to what was done in the study by De Jong and Perfetti, where they did this 4-3-2 type of training. I modified it a little bit. I made it a little bit shorter, but for all of those training activities, they recorded themselves speaking for 2 minutes, 1.5 minutes, and 1 minute.
And the target of each activity varied, so it wouldn't always be telling the same story?
Across the 6 tasks, yes. But when they repeated it each time within a task, when they recorded themselves for 2 minutes, then for 1.5 minutes, then for 1 minute, it was the same. They were just answering the same question or describing the same set of symbols.
Okay, so really reinforcing the two.
Yeah. So I was trying to do that the same way as De Jong and Perfetti, slightly different in terms of the amount of time. But what I was trying to introduce was this idea of task variation, where sometimes it was describing something that we could all see. So they're a little bit more responsible for what they can't just make up something, whereas you can with the open-ended activities, right? There's no one to check what you're talking about. Yeah.
Did you use the same prompts or in the pre-test versus the post-test?
Those 2 were identical. Yeah.
Do you think it would have been different if control group 1 had all closed-ended questions instead of all open-ended?
That's a good question. Yeah. I think I wonder if we might have seen a different pattern in the sense that the control group, we did see them improve on that particular, on that closed-ended activity on the post-test. We didn't see them improve on the other kind of activity that they did during training, which was the open-ended tasks. So had they done only the closed-ended tasks, I suspect we might have seen the same. We might have seen the same thing. I'm a little concerned about the numbers that I had in this study, and I think that I'd like to do something similar with larger numbers to see if these patterns emerge. But that's the kind of question that I would want to look at with more numbers. Have more groups and have them doing like all of those closed-ended tasks instead of a mix.
Was there any literature about the difference between like open-ended versus closed-ended training?
I haven't found any for focusing specifically on fluency development, but I have found this kind of thing in the literature on task-based instruction. Discussions of like how can we differentiate between tasks? Like what makes a task different from another one? And when De Jong and Perfetti did their study, they varied it based on just content, like topic. If I talk about pets, and then I talk about sports, does my fluency when I'm talking about sports transfer to when I'm talking about pets, right? Just topics. So I think there are different ways we can look at tasks. Are they different or not? And the way that I decided to do it was in terms of open-ended and closed-ended, which is part of the discussion of tasks in the literature on task-based instruction. I don't know if that's the most important way. It seemed to me it might be important for this group of students, academic purposes, engineering students, because a lot of the communication that they're going to have to do is going to involve content responsible communication, not just talking about your personal experience, but talking about a plan or a blueprint or something where there's, accuracy is going to be very important. Content accuracy, which I think one way of looking at that is a closed-ended task.
And what did the control group 2 do again?
Just pre-test, post-test.
And they took a regular class though?
These students were all taking an EAP course, which was
EAP?
English for academic purposes.
Okay.
So like an academic writing, reading, speaking, listening course. So they were all doing that.
The exact same class?
Yeah.
Okay.
Different sections of the same course.
Same teacher?
2 different teachers teaching the sections for all of these students. So yeah, there was some overlap, but not complete overlap.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, they didn't do anything extra from the research perspective, just the pre-test, post-test.
Okay.
I should check. In terms of time? Are we okay?
I don't
Is
think- I think
the
you're the
third
only
person?
person.
Am I the only person talking?
Well, I have one as well.
Oh, there it is.
But I don't know, there's 3 on there, isn't there?
The first one.
First person wasn't here.
Oh, first one wasn't here? Okay.
Yes. We've only gone 13 minutes, so I don't know what
Yeah,
the
so
rule is. Do we do
go ahead.
more? Do we do less?
2 more minutes?
Do 15 each.
Perfect.
Well, I'm a second language teacher like most of you, and I use the 432 a lot, and my students love that exercise. Yeah. And I even found a little way to gamify it where you can get points for using vocabulary words, and if you speak a certain amount of time instead of, finishing before the 432.
Nice.
So when you talk about this, one, it feels good because I'm happy that maybe they're able to transfer it out. And I am, new to the world of research. Is there something about that exercise that would lead to the 432 as opposed to some other exercises? What is your thought, or what is anyone's thought on that? Why is that such a good exercise?
The literature that I've seen on fluency development, that's the kind of technique that seems to have popped up the most in research looking at how we can promote fluency development. And there's some other ways that researchers have looked at this. For example, having students, read scripts and just, or different types of activities. But the 432 is one that's been popping up in literature going back to the 1990s in terms of potentially effective for fluency development. And why? Check out the study by De Jong and Perfetti, because they give a nice explanation of automatization and why, doing something again, it removes a little bit of the cognitive load and you can focus on different things, and they give a nice explanation for why that might work. Okay.
And for their study, how do you interpret their findings that the training with the same topic repeat, 3, 2, 1 works better than the different topic? What's your interpretation?
Yeah, because in their study, they had 2 groups, and they had one group do the same topic 4, 3, 2, and another group did different topics 4, 3, 2. So that was kind of interesting, and they found that the students who did the repetition of the same topic improved more and transferred this to new topics. How do I interpret that from a transfer perspective? it looks to me like they're transferring what they're learning to a similar kind of topic, right? A similar kind of task, because it's all still, based on like personal experience. It's quite open-ended. So from my perspective, I'd like to see if we can extend their results to see what happens, like I tried to do here, to see if that transfers to other types of tasks. I think we get an initial look at it here, but we should keep doing this to see how far, to very different types of tasks, what happens. Like, what about a dialogue, something like that?
That's where my curiosity about closed-ended tasks, that doesn't really reduce the load. Closed, you have to speak, it just come, you have to focus.
Yeah.
Curious as to whether it's that openness that made this work at that second.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I thought there was a difference there because they had to be accurate with the information. But you're right. Maybe it doesn't reduce the cognitive load. I don't know.
All right, that's been about 16
Thank you.
minutes,
Thanks, everyone.
and then we'll go on to the next one.